which she's just had a wonderful, great career. There's so much so much stuff on her, I can't even begin to put it into words. So I'm just gonna let Miss Armstead take it away. Hello?
Hello.
Yes.
Oh, hi. You need to get up. Sorry, I was just getting some help. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly fine.
Okay. So my name is Claire Armistead, and I am. I'm now. My official title now is Associate Editor Culture, but until recently I've been the books editor of The Guardian, and I'll give you a little bit of a background about me, just so that you can put myself in the picture. I'm probably a lot older than you. I'm definitely a lot older than most of you.
Oh, that's a lie. That's a lie. You know you're only 23.
I'm the big mama. I started out in the early 1980s, and I started out as a reporter. In those days, you'd go out to somewhere in the UK. You'd go out to a small town, and there were little newspapers, and you'd learn your craft. And I always say that is where my starting point is, because what it taught me was to tell a story. It's all about telling a story. And I always say to people, I'm not grand, I'm a craft-trained journalist. I'm a craft-trained journalist. And then, and I originally wanted to be an industrial correspondent, but in those days, they didn't even let women into the unions wouldn't even let women go into their meeting places and things. So it was completely impossible in the place that I was to be a woman. Young women encounter these sort of problems, but there have always been, and I think there do continue to be, discriminatory problems about women. So I moved towards the arts, and I became a theatre critic for a while, and then I moved into being an arts editor, and from there I moved into literature. And what the big things about my career and what I've observed is, you just go and you do it. And at different stages in your life, you have different things that you need. There are two of the problems that confront women, which I think still do, is that women tend to come through later as confident people who are confident to be in the public space. There have been various surveys. One particular survey done in the UK, which was about theatre directors, and they found that women theatre directors came through 10 years later, and I think that's quite common. And so you get this double whammy of coming through later, and then if you've come through just getting confident, and if you want to have kids, you have kids, and you get landed with childcare and things like that. So I think, while it's really great, that one of the reasons why women come through later is because they want to know what they're talking about before they shoot their mouths off, which is why we're great, why it's really important for people to listen to us. But at the same time, I think sometimes we need to push each other and push ourselves to go and command public space. And I notice as a literary editor that I've been doing the job for a very, very long time, and I still can't get 50% parity, 50% women to men. Women are much more reluctant to go into a space and put opinions, very strong opinions. And space, they prefer to be in an interviewing space. They prefer to use curiosity as a tool rather than criticism or judgment as a tool. But I just think that we need to interrogate ourselves all the way along the line. It's totally fine if we don't want to be in that space, but we need to ask ourselves questions about it, because in the end, the buck stops with us. Nobody notices if we're not there, but they do know, but they will notice us if we are there. And so then you come down to the question of what can women do about it. And I think one of the things is to find a good sisterhood, find a good group of people, but not just people who are going to say, oh, you're so wonderful, but find a group of critical allies. That's what I describe them as friends who you trust, who are going to tell you the truth, and you're going to be able to develop yourself, develop your ideas, and be supported at the same time. Another thing is that I think is very important now, particularly because of the way technologies are going, is to really give yourself the license to play. And I talk to a lot of students, and I always say, play with, because you might think you're setting out, you want to be the new Mark Twain, you want to be new Toni Morrison, you want to be a novelist, but actually we're to really key moment of technological history. Everything's changing. The platforms are changing. The sort of things you can do, the places you can do them are changing. Even concentration spans and things. And this can be a disadvantage, but it also has great opportunities. So look at all the new technologies there are, and be brave, put yourself into them, go and do some video, go and do, you know, all these new things, because it's the young digital native generation who are going to actually find the new literatures. And if you look back through the history of literature, the great jumps forward have nearly always coincided with great technological change. For example, in the 18th century, when a lot of journalism started up, it was because suddenly people learned how to do cheap printing. So it came up with printing. A lot of literary reviewing has coincided with newspaper technology. Now we're moving on from that. We're moving on to the internet. But these just give you such good opportunities. I think that there are disadvantages and there are advantages of this sort of wonderful global place we're in. If we're talking about The Guardian, where I work, we were like the fourth newspaper in the UK 10 years ago, and now we're the second in the world outside China. We have like 9 million people a day reading us. You say, well, what do you do with that? What do you do with that? It's massive. The downs, and it's also sort of, the potential reach and the potential audience is absolutely all around the world. And the thing about that also is that you can be niche, that there are lots and lots of different niches you can have. You might find that somebody's into, if you're a steampunk writer, say, then you might be a steampunk writer, and there are steampunk enthusiasts in Argentina, in the UK, in Scotland, in little bits of the UK. You can reach all these readers. The disadvantage of it is that there is so much out there, there's so much clamour, that you can end up feeling that nobody can hear you. So how do you make yourself heard? And I think that the thing about playing is really important. I think social networking is really important, but I also think that there is a danger of being overloaded with social network. And I do know a lot of writers who I feel are sort of spending so much time on Twitter and so much time doing these things that are actually not their prime job. You have to be a bit careful about how you manage your time and you manage your energy, because I'm a believer that you only have so many words in you in any given time, and I think you can spray them all out in 140 character tweets. And sometimes what you need to do is just take yourself away and actually do the writing. And I got involved in a conversation with some novelists a little while ago, and found out about some of the things that they use to stop themselves from doing this and damaging themselves by being overexposed and overstimulated as well. This is the other thing. You get wildly overstimulated by being on social media all the time. Sometimes you need to just pull back and take yourself down to that deeper place, which is where the bigger thoughts come from and where the breakthroughs in your own craft come from. And there are sort of a whole range of apps and things that they use. There's one called Write or Die, where if you don't write, it actually sort of destroys everything you write. There's one called Freedom, which will turn off the Twitter and the internet for you at given times, which you pre-programmed into it. There's one called Pomodoro, which counts useful 25-minute work slots and then gives you a 5-minute break. Also, all this is about managing workload, and I think workload's got really much more difficult to manage, and particularly if you're a writer sitting at home with all these temptations in front of you. And my favourite one is a picture of a kitten, a nice kitten, when you've written 100 words. So, yeah, I mean, I think another of the great advantages is it is very easy to publish. That is also a disadvantage, because it is very easy to publish badly. And if you're a writer, it's really, really important that you push yourself to do the best you possibly can before you submit it. Now, this is where your sisterly group will come into play, because if you have a good group around you of solid critical friends, you will be able to let them read things, and then they will tell you when they think it's ready. But there's a lot of particularly young writers, the temptation is you just get to a place where you're stuck, or you feel you've done enough and you just send it off too early, and you don't get very many goes. That's the trouble. If you send a document to 3 or 4 literary agents, you're not going to get another go. They're not going to necessarily look at you again. So I think that setting up the systems that will support you in knowing when something is ready to be put out to the public is really, really, really important. And that might seem like that contradicts what I was saying earlier about be confident, grab it, go for it. But I think those two things can really coexist. You just need, in fact, they should inform each other. And the other thing that I'd say to any young writers, and it's something that you'd be surprised how a lot of writers don't do it, is to read. Read other people's work. It's really, really, really important to read other people's work. Read. And a lot of the best writers I know, people like, Zadie Smith, for example, describes herself as a fangirl. She's a fan of other people's writing. That's where her writing comes from, because she's always reading and observing and absorbing the skills of other people and going back into the past and seeing what great literature is, what sort of things she would want to be doing. So yes, there you go. There are a few thoughts. Do you want to ask me some questions?
My technical person, behind the scenes person, I was like, I know you're involved in what she's saying, but I really need you to get on my mic now. I am taking notes.
Claire, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
As you stated earlier, there's so much. There's just literally so much out there. What would you tell, a beginning or an up and coming or even a struggling writer, as far as how to put yourself out there? There are. So how do you create your own platform, your own niche?
I think often you start publishing in little bits. There are an awful lot of magazines the creative writing magazines on the internet, and some of them are very, very well thought of. So you can start publishing little bits, and what you do by doing that, if you start putting yourself out, you begin to build a circle of people around you. You begin to educate people into what you have to offer and what's special about what you do. And and similarly, going back to my thing about creating groups, I just think that's really, really important, that you become part of a movement. You identify where you sit, and then once you've got the makings of a little circle around you, then you can expand your circle and people will get to know about you, and it's that word of mouth will happen. But often the word of mouth starts among writers, and because writers are often the best connoisseurs of other writers.
Very true. One more quick question. I've been reading a lot lately. There's sort of a school of thought that with the explosion of genre fiction and even micro niching, that literary fiction is dead or dying. What are your thoughts on? I refuse to accept that, but what are your professional thoughts on that?
I think that it's very, very difficult to make a living out of literary fiction. If you want money, you're going to have to go to genre, probably. There are very, very few people can make any money, but that's always been true. And it's something that is true of an awful lot of sorts of writing, is that you have to have a second skill. You have to have a day job. And an awful lot of people, the people I employ at The Guardian to work as critics, they are creative writers who earn extra money by being newspaper critics, or they teach. Often they teach and they're newspaper critics, or they do master classes and things, because you just have to accept as part of being a writer that if the route you're going down is not format bestsellers, because the further you go down that way, the more you have to write into a market slot. If that's not your bag, which is fine, it's fine if that is your bag. If it's not your bag, then it's going to be hard to make a living. but you know, many people do it, and they find ways of working that are ways of doing things that are complementary. I was talking to the other day a very well-known poet here called Simon Armitage, who is one of the very few poets. I mean, it's even harder to make a living if you're a poet than it is a literary novel. He does bits of television, he teaches, he does all sorts of things. And somebody said to him, well, you know, do you feel that takes away from your time, from your energy as a poet? And he said, it is all to do, it all comes from me being a poet. This is all the expansion of what it is to be a poet. So he doesn't regard them as separate. And I think that's a really healthy place to be. So he is a poet who does all sorts of things in the service of what he believes, which is his poetry. And out of that, he's managed to make a very good life. But what he doesn't do is sit at his desk just writing rhyming couplets all day, every day.
Thank you, Claire.
I absolutely believe in that. We're poets ourselves. The Anti-Thought Ladies are poets themselves. And yes, we do a whole lot of stuff that is in conjunction with what we absolutely believe in, which is empowering women, which is telling people to get out there and write your books. And we did have a question from some of the audience here, and they wanted to know there has to be like a fine line between your critical allies and what people in the United States would just call haters. And how do you know the difference?
Between what? Between your critical
allies and what people in the United States would probably just call haters, people that just don't want to see you succeed. How can you differentiate them?
Oh, I think that every writer has to have an inner critic, and I think that it's useful and important to cultivate that, but it is also, you have to be able to switch it off. so you sort of have to have two things going in tandem. And if your inner critic is working well and your creative side is working well, then you know that gives you a very strong armor against people who you know, and every creative writer will have people come up against people who try to knock them down, because there are more people out there. I mean, there are people who are jealous, apart from anything else. There are people who don't like what you do just because it isn't to their taste, and they're the person who's in a position of power. And, you know, believe me, if you're too thin-skinned to take that, you really don't want to be in this business, because it is really tough. I think it's the road less travelled, and an awful lot of people come out of doing MFAs and things, and they never actually make it. They don't actually go on to do it professionally. They go into some sideline, maybe they go into advertising or marketing or things like that, because it is really, really tough, and you're on your own. And it's magnificent for a little proportion of the time, but most of the time you're battling with your own demons as well as other people's.
Question from the audience.
Yes, I had a question regarding, you've obviously been doing this for a long time, and you had mentioned it was a highly male dominated. So what are some things that you have done to push through and to
break the glass ceiling?
Break the glass ceiling, absolutely.
What have I done? One thing I have done is I think that if I look at what my particular attributes are, why I've managed to keep going when a lot of people haven't, I think it's partly because I'm actually very open to doing different things. So, for example, I'm quite old to have actually adopted the internet and become an internet journalist. And there was a point when we moved building, it was about 7 years ago, we moved to a new building, and I went on a site visit with, one of those hard hat visits when it's all sort of rubble. And I looked at the floor plan, and there was the whole of the culture section of the old, the newspaper that I knew. And then on the floor above it, a whole floor was devoted to multimedia. So I thought, oh my goodness, I've got to learn how to broadcast, because it was just looking at the floor plan, I could see that was the way the future was going. So I just thought, well, right, I'm going to learn how to do at least podcasting. I don't like video because I just think I'm too old for video. I can't be bothered to put makeup on all the time. But but audio, I love audio. But it took me 6 months to be able to listen to my own voice because I was so embarrassed about it. And I just thought, if you take little steps and you just take one step in front of the other, each time they ask you back, it means you haven't done so badly. And gradually you get to listen to yourself, and then you critique yourself, and you realize that you never finish a sentence, which was one of the things that I did, and you just get better and better at it. And that's where, when I said playing, the importance of play and the importance of being a little bit brave and pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, because none of us in these days very few of us are so good and so successful in such a successful niche that we can do one thing and live by it. I think we all have to have portfolio careers. And actually, I think that women are at an advantage in that, because I think we're just very good at doing lots of different things. So the old cliche, we're better at multitasking, I think. But I sort of think in a way we are. And so I actually found that I really liked podcasting because actually I prefer, and this is another thing, is look at yourself, work out what your strengths are, what makes your heart sing. So it makes my heart sing more to find out from someone about them than to judge them. So I really like that curious questioning space better than I like the critical space. So although I have worked as a critic, I sort of moved sideways into sort of feature questioning, interviewing space, because it's my temperament. That's where I'm happier. That, and I also think that that's quite a female thing. A lot of women tend to move towards that side rather than to put themselves in that very interrogative arena that criticism is.
Thank you so much, Ms. Armstead.
If they allow the back to screens person to say one thing, I thank you so much for showing up, and it was very enjoyable listening to you speak. And we're all we're in that Thought Ladies from a group, so we're all looking forward to visiting your dear country in July. So,
well, I hope you'll continue to come to us. Come and see us, and come to the Guardian. Come and meet us.
I would love to. We're totally going to discuss that offline. Absolutely. Now, thank you so much for showing up and giving us this wonderful, empowering speech. And thank you for being inspirational.
Well, thank you very much for asking me, and good luck with all your lives and your careers.
Thank you.
Be wonderful. Be the best you can be. That's all we can do.
It's very true, and thank you. The next speaker up is